writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspirations for growing your self-publishing business. I'm Joni. I work on author engagement with the Kobo Writing Life team.
And I'm Stephanie McGrath, your host, the Publisher Operations Specialist here at Kobo Writing Life. So this episode we are talking to Sarah Williams about the creation of her audiobook, which she actually undertook herself.
Yeah, she worked very closely with her narrator on the production of the audiobook, and she had a really great experience with it.
And she kind of found her narrator by chance one day when she met him in real life.
He's a very cute Australian actor.
So she got lucky there.
Yes.
Finding the great audiobook guy.
Apparently he was on Neighbours.
Wow, okay. We need to catch up on our Australian dramas.
Yes.
And make sure to stay tuned to the end of this episode because we have a very exciting offer on one of Sarah's title, exclusive to KW listeners. So please stay tuned.
The Julia Creek Camp Draft was an annual event that pulled crowds from near and far. When they arrived, McIntyre Park was already jam-packed with enthusiastic spectators decked out in their best Western-style shirts, boots, and wide-brimmed hats. Megan readjusted her akubra as she watched Lockie and Darcy set up a makeshift yard for Darcy's horse, Jasper. Harriet took Megan's hand. "Come, I'll show you around and introduce you to some people." Megan followed her gratefully. She hated feeling unnecessary while people had work to do. The women made their way past makeshift campsites where families and friends huddled on picnic blankets or on the backs of trucks that had been parked there since before sunrise. Megan gazed admiringly at the stockmen, graziers, ringers, station hands and their partners. They had taken the time out from their busy lives, burdened by the never-ending drought, to come, possibly hundreds of kilometres, to this event. She pulled her akubra lower, feeling like a phony in her blue jeans, purple blouse and dirty boots. She had purposely avoided any type of sparkly belt buckle and grinned when she saw two tall blonde girls pass her, their glitzy buckles threaded through too tight denim jeans.
Can you just tell our listeners a bit about you and how you basically got into the world of self-publishing?
Yeah, sure. So when I was about 14 years old, I actually picked up a copy of a romance novel at my aunt's house. She was about to give it to charity and I saw it and said, "Can I have that?" She said yes, probably forgetting how steamy it actually was. It was called This Cold Range by Janet Daly, the American author. And I took it home and just devoured it in about a day, I guess. And that started me. I said to my dad that night, "I'm going to be a writer when I grow up." And he kind of sighed and said, "Oh gosh, no, please don't." But he's a great businessman, and so he said, "Well, okay, if that's what you want to do, just go off and have a lot of experiences and just live an interesting life, and then you'll have something to write about." So I thought that was pretty good. So I went off. So I'm from New Zealand originally, decided to get out of there pretty quickly. So I've lived in the US, I've lived in Europe, and then I came back and I moved to Melbourne in Australia. And then I got married, had 4 children, and they're still young children too. So the oldest is only 12. And we live in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland now. And it was when my littlest, my youngest of twin girls, it was when they were about 3 that I decided it was either I get a real job or give this writing thing a good shot. So I decided to do that. And it seemed to be as soon as I decided to be a writer, all these opportunities came my way. I was living in a very rural, remote town at the time. And as soon as I decided I was going to be a writer, the next thing I knew was there was a writers' festival coming to town, which was probably the first time they'd ever had one. So that was pretty exciting. There were lots of big names who came, and I did pretty much every workshop they offered, but the best one was how to write a romance novel. So I loved it. The lady giving it, teaching the workshop, she gave us all of this wealth of information and things to take away, and I took it home and I did everything she told me to do, And the very next day I plotted out my novel,
Wow.
which it was at the time I decided it was going to be called The Brothers of Brigadier Station, and it was going to be set in the outback, Australian outback, and it was going to be a love story with two brothers kind of both falling in love with the same girl, because who doesn't
drama.
And very much inspired by Chris and Liam Hemsworth.
Oh yeah.
How good would they look in jeans and in a Cobra? And so I wrote that. It took a couple of years to write that, and then I went to the Romance Writers of Australia conference. I pitched it, and I actually got offered a contract, which I decided to turn down. That would have been in 2016, when independent publishing was pretty popular and more widely known about overseas, but in Australia we were, if you were going to self-publish, you were looked down on quite badly. But I have been a big fan of Joanna Penn since probably 6 years now, and I've met her and I love her to pieces, and I thought, if she can do it, I can do it. So followed her advice and got into it. I've been published now 2 years. I started my own publishing business and everything, so I publish other people now too. But it's 2 years later, 7 books done, and a lot more on the way.
First started self-publishing, was there anything that surprised you when you first started out, or something that was harder than you initially anticipated?
I think the paperwork was harder than I initially anticipated.
I keep hearing that.
It's a lot easier now. Living in Australia, and I was having to follow what the Americans and the English and the Canadians and that sort of thing were doing, rather than, there wasn't really anyone in Australia I could just turn to and say, you're doing this successfully, show me how. No one was doing it, or at least no one I knew of. And so it was a lot of trial and error, but we got there in the end. My first book, it wasn't hugely successful, and it was actually really quite badly edited. But my second book, that one went live with about 3,000 pre-orders, which surprised the crap out of me. Because there was no promoting it or anything, we weren't advertising in 2017. And but it was fantastic, and I've been wide since day dot. So as soon as I signed up with everyone, including Kobo, and you guys have been absolutely fantastic. I love Kobo to pieces.
We love hearing that.
And I think I've been asked a lot over the years if I'm just going to go exclusive, but I don't think that's at all a good idea for people in Australia specifically, anyway, if we write about Australian locations, because Kobo is like our second biggest market here. So we'd be missing out on a heck of a lot of fans if we did that. And I'm certainly not going to, say no to my nice little royalty check that rolls in each month.
How have you noticed the publishing landscape change since you got into it? You were saying you weren't doing a lot of marketing in 2017. Like, how have things changed?
Yeah. So, specifically in Australia, when I've gone to the Romance Writers of Australia conference every year for about 4 years now, and it's shifted. So it started off that you wanted to get a deal with Harlequin or Mills and Boon. That was, what we were all getting pushed at. And so many people just weren't getting those contracts and getting knocked back and just so depressed about it. And I'm a very positive person, and I thought, no, I'm just going to keep persevering. So, but then when I read that contract, it was like, no, there's no way I'm taking this, because they're very Australian only kind of rights as well. So it would have been really limiting. And it started off when we didn't have to advertise, and I didn't advertise at all until probably last year. And then I've, of course, done Mark Dawson's courses. I'm a big supporter of everything they do over there, and the Sell More Books show. And of course, Joanna, I do everything that she ever produces and buy everything she does. Things have really changed, and I'm on about high 5 figures a year now. Which is great, but I'm definitely spending a lot more money on the Facebook ads and the Amazon ads, and I haven't really gotten into BookBub ads. They still scare me a little bit.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the contracts for Mills and Boon and Harlequin are hard to find. Is that what made you want to start sending authors yourself to your own publishing house?
Yeah. I just wanted to offer something. I know how to do these things, and the people who don't really want to go with Harlequin, Mills and Boon, or one of the other top 5 because they know what they're like. They started coming to me and said, well, can you help me? And I said, well, as long as it's really good, I'll do it. So I've signed up 3 authors so far, and they're all have books coming out this year, and they're all romance books. So I'm not really interested in anything that doesn't have romantic aspects to it, just because I know the market so well, and I feel like I'd be able to do another market justice.
Are all of your books Australia focused? Are they all set in Australia?
They are actually. It was just a case of I love American cowboys and I love historicals, and I am writing a historical, but it's not ready yet. And but yeah, they're all just based in the outback, so same sort of storylines that you might find in something set in Montana, but it's set in Australia, in Queensland outback, because I know it. I've been out there, I've got friends out there, and it's one of those write what you know sort of things. And they sell really well overseas.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I can imagine that, though.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of I started off selling in Australia, and it might be just the advertising is hitting the Americans more, because you can't actually advertise to Australians like on Amazon and that sort of thing. So I probably make more out of the American market though than I do out of the anywhere else. I mean, Australia is probably second and the UK is third, I guess. But yeah, the Americans, I have the occasional comment on we don't understand what that word means, and I say, well, just get on your e-reader or your app or whatever and click on it, and it'll tell you what that word means in the dictionary.
We have to learn all of the American words. We can learn some.
That's it. But yeah, no, it's been really good. And then when I turned The Brothers of Brigadier Station into an audiobook, which was quite recent, I really had to think about who I was going to choose to narrate it. It had to be someone with an Australian accent, but an Australian accent that was sexy and able to be understood. So that was a whole nother issue I had to think about, that you can't have an American playing an Australian. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can we talk a bit more about your audiobook? So you actually reached out to us because you had created your own audiobook yourself. You were basically the production house. But can you tell us a bit about the process of, I guess, why did you decide to make an audiobook, and then how that process unfurled and you had a completed audiobook at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been thinking about doing an audiobook for about the last year, when Joanna Penn started talking about doing that. And it just happened to be that I had booked to go to a charity event here in my hometown. I live in quite a small hometown, and they were raising money for my kids' school, so I thought I'd go to that. And then it popped up on Facebook that they had invited this Australian actor to come to it. And I saw the picture and I thought, oh gosh, that looks like that guy from McLeods Daughters, which was a TV show in the early 2000s. And it was the most successful TV show that Australia has ever had. And it's still, widely streamed and watched still now, 10 years later. And he's, the love interest back then and everything. So he's still quite young. And it was interesting because McLeods Daughters was this show with 2 sisters who kind of fell in love with 2 brothers, and they all lived in the outback and rode horses and mustard cattle and everything that's in my books. And I went to this event and I met him, and I just said, oh, I'm this author, and I was just wondering if you'd be interested in narrating. And he just turned to me with this surprised look and said, actually, that's something I've just started thinking I'd like to do. So it was a bit kismet sort of thing. So I gave him my card and he emailed me back, and then he had to audition. And his audition was just spectacular. It was just so obvious he was the right choice. He's got this beautiful voice and just a country enough accent, but it's easily enough understood so the Americans and the British and the Canadians will be able to understand him. So he lives across the country in Perth on the other side. So it was just easier for me to book a studio. He would go in there, and then I decided to fly over because I'm a bit of a control freak and I wanted to see how it went. And so I went over there and we spent 2 days in the studio. So it was his first time doing it, was my first time doing it. So it took a little bit longer than it, really probably needed to. And I basically project managed the whole thing. I had to direct him a couple of times if he got a word wrong or didn't quite say something the way I wanted him to say it. But he picked up the characteristics of the different characters really quickly. So he got them, which really kind of surprised me. But no, it was really fantastic. So once he had done all the recording, I then edited it all from my house, and I host a podcast, so editing audio files is nothing new to me, so that was fine. And then I sent it back to the producer in Perth, and he just mastered it all up, and then we uploaded it. We uploaded it to Findaway Voices. We don't have ACX. We can't get onto that here anyway, not that I'd probably use it if we did. It's gone live now, and it's just getting absolute rave reviews. Everyone just loves it. To the point where, we've got 2 more in the series that I've already written, so he's already booked in. He was very excited when I asked him to do the next 2, so we're booked in to do that in a couple of months' time.
Amazing.
So do you think, sorry, go ahead, Joni.
No, I was going to ask, do you think you have a lot of crossover? Are the people that read your books listening to the audio as well, or are you reaching new readers with audio?
A bit of both, actually. With Findaway Voices, you don't always see your sales in real time. So the ones I am seeing in real time are all library hires, and they're all in America.
Okay.
So that's really great. And I love libraries. I do a lot of work with libraries, so I think that's brilliant. But then I am getting a lot of messages on Facebook and Instagram just saying, oh, I've got it and it's so good. And I read the book and I thought the book was good, but the audio, it's a whole new level. And it's, just being performed in such an incredible way by, Miles he's an award-winning actor. So he really did put everything he had into the performance. And it really, you can tell that he's a professional.
Do you have any tips you would say for someone who is nervous to make their own audiobook?
Yeah, there's definitely other ways of doing it. You can go and, record it yourself, and I've got plenty of friends who have done that. I've got this really strange accent, which is half Australian, half American, and a little bit of, European. So there was no way I was ever going to narrate it myself. And I also, when I was waiting for Findaway Voices to kind of find a narrator for me, I could see that they were having troubles trying to find an Australian, which was one of the reasons that I decided to go and find my own. But there is certainly those ways that you can do it, where you just hire a narrator and they take care of all that hard stuff for you, and you just have to check the quality of the files and that sort of thing. The advertising and promoting it's quite new to me, so I'm still doing a lot of research, and I've got an audiobook tour coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And then because I've got Miles, who is really supportive and happy to do all sorts of promotions with me, we're actually doing a lot of interviews and a lot of magazines and those sorts of things within Australia. So that's really good. He's got something like 16,000 Instagram followers. So
amazing.
Utilize those. And he's also agreed to come over to Queensland in September, where we've been invited by some of the big libraries in the city to do some talks. And then the Queensland Writer Centre's asked us to do a workshop as well. So that'll be really exciting in September.
It's going to be hard for you to find another narrator.
Yeah,
strong start to your audiobook.
he's pretty happy to do the entire Brigadier Station series, so I'll keep going with that. It could be a never-ending series now.
Does he have to make a different voice for each book?
Not for each book, because most of the characters reappear.
Oh,
so
that's right.
Yeah, it's a different couple each time, but they're all related. So they're like the three brothers have their stories, and then their mum has the stories. So yeah, I don't think it'll be too hard for him if I do someone new. But probably I'd say if someone does want to get their manuscript performed or narrated, one of the things I really did notice was that it sounds so different when it's being performed, and even when it's being read aloud. So I definitely think that before you hit publish, you should read it aloud, or even have someone else read it aloud, preferably perform it. Because I spent so many hours listening to his voice and to the audio, especially when I was editing. I was probably editing for about 40 hours. I know every little quirk in his voice now. So I just pull it up. If I'm writing, I just finished writing the third in the series, and his voice was so fresh in my mind that every sentence I wrote, I could just imagine how he's going to perform it. And if it didn't quite sound right in my mind, or when I spoke it out loud, it had to be changed. So it's much easier to do that when you push publish the first time than later when it's been recorded. It's too expensive to go back and get the same book recorded for a second time. Like, yeah, I don't really want to think about that.
I don't think anyone would want to do that.
Do you enjoy the process though? Did you like being there for the recording and directing it?
Yeah, I loved it. He's such a great performer, and it was really inspiring to see how other creatives, warm up, and how you can see all this concentration while he's thinking about how he wants this to come across. And he'd turn to me every now and then and say, is that right? Or do you want me to try it a different way? I mean, he asked my opinion a lot. And so it was really interesting to see it all done. And yeah, it's just taken the way I do things to a different level, because like I said, I'm thinking about how he's going to perform it, and then I'm also just creatively inspired by being around other creatives. And on our breaks he'd be playing the piano or the guitar or something like that. It's very musical, and we'd have some great chats about method acting and other sorts of things. So I got a lot out of it. I always get a lot out of other creative people whenever I'm around them. I'm just like a sponge, and I just want to know everything. And then one time after I was back from Perth, I actually had to Skype in a session. He just had to do a couple of edits. And that was really different too, because I wasn't there, but I was more in the same room with him, because I was on Skype and they set me up on a tablet next to the script on a music, where you put your music on one of those stands. Mm-hmm. And so then I was like right there in the room with him, and before I'd been separated by this glass wall. So it was interesting, because I could tell every time I like scratched my nose or something, he'd look at me like I was trying to get his attention, and I wasn't.
It must have been very cool to watch your work come to life like that.
It was.
It sounds.
I would love one day to see it on film or television or something. I'm really, really ambitious. And this was definitely like the next best thing to that, was seeing it performed and at such a professional level like that. So yeah, it was, I listen to it now and I still just get goosebumps, and it brings everything back, and I just go, oh my God, that was so cool.
Great experience.
Yeah, it really was.
So how long did it take for the whole process?
Yeah, so we were in the studio. He probably spent 4 sessions, I guess, so probably about 20 hours in total in the studio. And then I would have spent about 40 hours editing it all. And then the producer mixed it and mastered it and got it all ready. So that was another 10 hours. And it ended up being just over 5 hours finished. So it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, but like I said, if you were to go through something like ACX or Find a Way and you get that narrator who does everything and you just pay that per finished hour, it's a lot cheaper. And I've heard some really good narrators. I adore audiobooks. I listen to at least one a week, as well as reading about 3 books. And I adore them. Some of my favorites are narrated by the author. Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic comes to mind. I listen to that about 4 times a year. I adore that book. So there are some really good narrators out there as well. And I might look at that for one of my other series at some point. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Do you think you said that you publish other writers also. Would you consider doing audio and making that an even bigger project?
Yeah, for sure. I actually do a lot of consultancy work. So people who are running their own accounts and doing it all themselves. I've got a meeting with a really quite famous Regency romance author next week to discuss organising the audio for her. So it's going to be really exciting. I think Regency narration might be a little bit easier. There's definitely a lot more Regency romances on audiobooks than there are Australian rural romance. So it'll be really exciting. I love talking to different narrators and listening to how they're going to perform something, and their take on those characters that are your characters. So it's interesting to see what other people think about them. So, but yeah, I think audiobooks are they're not going anywhere. They're just getting more popular and more popular each year. So it's silly not to do it, really.
They've been around for years. Like we think they're new, but books on tape have been around for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get asked quite a lot, or I got asked before the book came out by my son's dyslexic. So I know a lot of dyslexic people. And they're always saying, I just can't read a book, or, an e-reader screen just is too funny on their eyes. And if you get it done in audio, I'll definitely listen to it. And then my mum knows a lot of people in elderly, homes for the older people. And they're always saying, we want an audio book, but because we can't read it. And so, I've been able to give her all these download codes and things now, and she goes and plays it for all of her friends in the rest home.
I love that.
Yeah.
And going back to, you mentioned libraries earlier, do you do anything in particular to target library readers, or do you just let that happen organically?
There's only a few things we can do in Australia. And the libraries here still prefer print copies. So I've actually found that just printing them with Ingram Spark is kind of enough to get them in at most of those libraries here. I don't know. I think Australians on a whole are still more interested in having a paperback than they are kind of picking up on this ebook and trend. So I still get a lot out of the Australians, but again, it's certainly a lot more in the libraries in England and in the US. But I'd even still say it's more of the audiobooks that are getting picked up than the ebooks have in the States too.
So as you described the Australian market, it seems kind of difficult to target. Do you have any key aspects that author could try to target Australia specifically when marketing or showing a new book that they have?
Especially for authors outside of Australia.
Trying to okay. Probably in terms of advertising, Facebook ads have been, they're a bit hit and miss, but you can get quite a narrow market, which if you listen to Mark Dawson, he tends to think that's a good thing. So you can narrow that down, and I get some good click-through rates. And then I've gotten to know a lot of independent bookstores really well, especially where I live. We're a very creative region right here. And so I'll go in and I'll do library visits, and I connect with lots of other romance readers in Australia. So I've gone every year to the Romance Writers of Australia conference, and that's all networking and talking to people and joining forces. And last year I even went to the Romance Writers of New Zealand conference because Bella Andre was there and I wanted to meet her. And
Did you meet her?
Yeah, I did get to meet her. I even interviewed her on the podcast. It was fantastic. She's absolutely gorgeous person. So I think a lot of it is just cross-promoting each other. So within the Romance Writers of Australia, we'll share when somebody else has a new book release or something, interesting to say. And so Facebook groups and that sort of thing, more so probably than actually the advertising on it. And we all just love each other's work, and we're always reading each other's work, and we're always recommending it, because you're not gonna just choose one romance reader and not read anyone else. So it's a really great network, both of these ones, and there's a couple of other Australian based romance reading groups that are online, so they're quite handy. And then I guess I'm pretty out there on social media. I'm always posting on social media, and I have the podcast, so that's every week, so my website's always getting updated. And I try and share the love around as much as I can, and stay positive, and don't let any of the negativity that goes on in the publishing industry kind of get to me.
So tell us about your podcast. What do you talk about?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Write with Love, and it's a weekly podcast, and I just interview another author of romance or romantic fiction. So we just talk about them and their story and their books. And it's great. I've talked to, so people would be like Bella Andre, Marie Force, Monica McInerney, a few other. There's a lot of New Zealand and Australian writers as well that I get to talk to. So I love talking, especially to the New Zealanders. I never knew there were so many romance authors in New Zealand. But they're a spectacular bunch. They're really switched on. So I always get something out of talking to them, and something out of talking to anyone that I talk to. There's so many interesting ideas and backgrounds and genres that they write in as well. So I'm talking to Steph Green tomorrow, who writes about reverse harem. So I can't wait to learn more about that.
Do you know what that is?
No. You have to explain it.
To explain it. So reverse harem is when there's one woman and multiple men that she
That's
is
hot.
with.
Hot genre right now. I got it.
It is.
So what do you think is the best thing that you've done for your self-publishing business?
I honestly think doing this audiobook was the best thing I've done. It's really raised my profile, and I'm getting a lot of media attention from it, which is really flowing over into the other book sales.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've got 7 of them. 5 of them are romance, and then there's 2 non-fiction books. And I just had another book release. My 3rd in the Brigadier Station series just came out like last week. And having that audio book, everyone had read the first in the series, well, they'd listened to the first in the series, then they'd read the second, so then they were really keen to get to the 3rd one when it came out. So it's been a stellar couple of weeks with the audio book coming out and then the new book coming out. So I definitely think that was just the best thing I've done. And I have no regrets about the big money I had to spend or anything like that. It was a really good return on investment. That'll probably be paid off by the end of the year.
And then where can people find you online? And also, you do courses? You were talking about a writing retreat that you did?
Yeah, I've just started this year doing some mentoring and helping people learn the craft and learn the business. So this past weekend I had a writer's retreat, just a local house that I found near where I live in the beautiful Sunshine Coast hinterland. And there were about 7 of us there all together, and we just got to do a lot of writing. And then I taught some workshops, and one actually on self-publishing. And then we just discussed the story ideas, and a couple of them pitched to me as well while they were there, which was great. And so I get a lot of joy out of just helping other people achieve the success that they want and that they deserve. And I'll tell them if they're doing something wrong in the nicest possible way. And so that's been really good. And I'm doing a lot of presenting and on panels for writers' festivals and those sorts of things this year. The Queensland Writers Centre is hosting GenreCon, which is all romance, fantasy, mystery, anything but literary fiction, basically. And that's happening in November, and they've asked me to teach a workshop on audiobooks and then to be on some panels as well. So that's going to be really exciting. And then I'm teaching a course actually at the Romance Writers of Australia all about podcasting. So
You're busy.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy few months actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find you?
They can find me on my website, which is sarahwilliamsauthor.com. And all my links to social media is on there as well.
Perfect. We'll post those also on the blog and in our show notes.
Fabulous.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for having me on.
We have an exciting offer exclusive to KWL podcast listeners. In this episode, you heard an audiobook excerpt from the first title in Sarah's Brigadier Station series. For a limited time only, you can purchase the ebook of The Brothers of Brigadier Station for 99 cents with the promo code KWLPodStation. All uppercase, all one word. This is available in all of our English language stores.
Once again, you can get a copy of the ebook The Brothers of Brigadier Station for 99 cents when using the promo code KWLPodStation on Kobo.com. This is a limited time offer available only between August 13th to 26th. So get your copy now. It's only 99 cents.
Kobo.com. Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're looking to buy Sarah Williams' book on sale right now, head over to Kobo.com, put in the promo code KWLPodStation. And if you're looking for extra tips on how to grow your sales, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by Joni DePlachto and Stephanie McGrath. Music has been provided by Tearjerker, and special thanks to Sarah for being a guest on our podcast.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at Kobo.com/writing life. Until next time, happy writing.